fact that as the AI models get larger, their politics all sort of converge on a vaguely leftist, vaguely centrist kind of viewpoint. And that includes Chinese models and American models. So we don't understand a lot about the biases of the system yet. So I do think that is, that's worth worrying about. But they also could change their politics. If you talk to an AI in Korean, it answers with a much more Korean view of the world than if you talk to it in English. And there's a controlled experiment on that as well. So I think we're still learning about how to interact with these systems and how they interact with our views and approaches.
Mm. Um, then there's also the question, Professor Malik, I have about when these systems. It's one thing to get people individually more educated, and again, I'm very attracted to this idea of like using our own human agency in terms of how we want AI to enhance our lives, right? To shore up our weaknesses rather than like replace our strengths. That's something that you mentioned in another interview. Actually, I think it was with Ezra Klein in the New York Times. But then I do have to like your take on the areas in which we have no control over how AI is being used. Like the big tools that companies are launching, or the ways in which it is replacing people's jobs. I mean, how would you rate thus far, looking at when you were advising the White House, political leaders' understanding of what guardrails we could or should be using, or their understanding of how transformative AI is actually going to be?
So first, let's start with a note of modesty here on this front, which is like, I talk to all the AI labs on a regular basis. I talk to all these leaders that you mentioned, and I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen with AI and how transformative it's going to be, except that in what ways exactly. So I think the right thing in politics is probably fast reaction to change, right? You don't necessarily regulate electricity when it's first generated, but you absolutely regulate how it's used. And so in an ideal world, we would see fast responses by experts to emerging problems rather than necessarily trying to pre-write all of the potential risks in advance, because we can't anticipate all of those. I think that what ends up happening in a lot of AI discussions is a focus on existential risk, which I think is very real. Like, there's a lot of very serious people worried about AI's ability to murder us all or become self-aware. And there's a lot of people who dismiss that and say AI will cure all disease. I don't know who's right. So I think it's worth spending some time worrying about that. But I do worry that that kind of discussion obscures the agency we have over how this is used in companies, how this is used in advertising, how this is, what kinds of behavior we want to encourage and discourage. And that is something, we're talking about at the individual level, but also company level, policy level. We get to make choices about that. And I do worry that people are not thinking enough about those smaller but very significant choices.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left here, and I just, was it yesterday or just this week, the Trump administration released what it calls America's AI Action Plan. And it's quite a long document outlining the administration's priority on how to develop AI for the advantage of the United States. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that. Have you?
I've spent a little time with it, and I'm not an expert. So
Okay.
neither are AI, so I can make some stuff up too.
Okay, but so in terms of to be fair, I hear you when you said you hadn't had a chance to look at all of it, but is that the kind of action plan, let me put it more broadly, that you would like to see more of in terms of political leadership on AI?
So I think as you said, it's pretty extensive at very high level. A lot of it is directing the National Institute of Standards to do something, or the Department of Education, whether or not that is still operational, to do tasks. So I think there is value in an executive level plan that prioritizes AI and assigns experts to start assessing and solving problems. So there is actually a very admirable part of the plan around how do we better assess AI and figure out ways to have AI better explain its own decisions. Interpretability, it's called. How do we increase control? So there is a lot of that kind of action that's needed, and I think it sets up some directives that would be very important. The question is, how fast are they executed and by whom, right? And especially in a government that's rapidly changing and downsizing. So I think that there's real value in articulating a vision, and I would hope that that happens at the level of universities, at the level of NPR, about what the vision for AI is. But then we actually we can't just have a vision. We have to start acting on that very quickly and shaping where things go.
I am very enamored of the idea that the more people understand these tools, at least the subset of publicly available LLMs, the more that gives us the agency to perhaps say when other major changes in AI come or their tools are launched that people don't like, we can say, hey, no, we understand sort of how this stuff works, so therefore we don't want you to make this development. I get that. It's like a more empowered public. But it feels like still we've got a long ways to go on that front. But I very much appreciate you, Professor Malik, for getting us started on that. So thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and that is indeed in my own voice.
Thank you so much. Well, Ethan Malik is an associate professor of management and co-director of the Generative AI Labs at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He's author of Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public. And City Space Productions, WBUR's creative studio for custom podcasts that tell a brand's story to ignite engagement, reach new audiences, or enhance customer connections. WBUR.org/creative studio.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. It's just a few minutes before noon and time for Week in Review. Here is your host, Bill Radke, with a preview.
Hello, you got your ballot, right? Somewhere on a desk, in a recycling bin. No, fetch it out. Listen to Week in Review coming up here. You can help run things. You can help run our cities and counties and state schools when you're a smart voter. So we'll do what we can, all that. Also, how can we do better on child welfare in this state? We know now which Seattle police officers were at the January 6th rally, but should we know that? And what should happen to them? It's the annual roar of the Navy Blue Angels debate, all of that and more, plus what made us smile this week. So stay tuned.
School's out, and Seattle summer is officially here. KUOW is ready to help you fill the sunny days ahead with our Summer Activity Series. Each week, we'll send you a print-at-home activity sheet lovingly crafted for public radio nerds of all ages. Stay curious and entertained with games, puzzles, coloring pages, local recommendations, and more. Sign up today at KUOW.org/summer.
Support for KUOW comes from Evergreen Health, a community-owned hospital system created and led by members of the community, offering access to over 70 specialties in Kirkland and Monroe and urgent and primary care practices across King and Snohomish counties. Learn more at evergreenhealth.com.
KUOW would like to recognize members of the community who included a gift to this station in their will. You are hearing programming today thanks to the generosity of Robert Aldridge, Paula Bishop, Alice Blanchard, Dennis Braga, Donna Jane Gaffney, and others who left a legacy with KUOW.
Everybody's crashing out. It basically means to have a meltdown, to reach your limit emotionally.
What do you mean? Ozzy Osbourne died!
To lose your cool.
You shouldn't have any other choice but to give us a roof over our heads, food for our stomachs, and whatever else we need to survive!
Next time on Today Explained.
That's coming up this afternoon at 6 on KUOW.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today he's considering what he called alternative options to negotiations with Hamas on a ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. recalled its negotiating team from Qatar yesterday after weeks of talks with no major breakthrough. President Trump says he doesn't think Hamas wants a deal.
Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and They're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up.
The president spoke this morning before leaving for Scotland for a 4-day visit. He's expected to arrive there within the hour. He's to meet with officials and visit his 2 golf clubs. France says it will recognize a Palestinian state this September. It's the first of the so-called G7 industrialized states to do so. The United Kingdom is under pressure to do the same. NPR's Lauren Freer reports.
Hundreds of British lawmakers and former diplomats have signed letters calling on Prime Minister Keir Starmer to recognize a Palestinian state. After France said it would do so, Starmer was supposed to hold an emergency call with his French and German counterparts. But it was postponed and they issued a statement instead, calling on Israel to immediately lift restrictions on the flow of aid to Gaza. Starmer issued a separate statement saying he's working on a pathway to Mideast peace and that recognition of a Palestinian state is part of that, but that it must be part of a wider plan, and he did not give a timeline. His government has suspended some arms exports to Israel, but continues to send it fighter jet components and share intelligence. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, Edinburgh.
The Minnesota legislature is now offering to cover the cost of home safety measures for state elected officials. This follows a deadly shooting of a state representative last month. Minnesota Public Radio's Dana Ferguson has more.
The state will provide up to $4,500 for the upgrades. House and Senate officials say the funds will come from the chamber's operating budgets. The move to improve lawmakers' home security comes after State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed at their home. Another lawmaker and his wife were shot by a man officials believe is the same assailant. Senator Julia Coleman says the state funds have made a difference for her.
I've been able to secure my home enough that I can sleep at night again, and I really wasn't able to until that was all set up.
Lawmakers can also tap up to $3,000 in campaign funds for security measures. For NPR News, I'm Dana Ferguson in St. Paul.
In this final hour of trading on Wall Street, the Dow is up 210 points. This is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Noelle Gasca in Seattle. Many wildland firefighting jobs are still vacant, despite claims from the White House that they've been filled. The Department of Agriculture says it has hit 99% of its firefighter hiring goal, but an investigation from ProPublica finds that number is misleading. The news outlet found that as of last week, 27% of firefighting jobs at the U.S. Forest Service are still vacant, and that does not include resignations of senior management or layoffs in other departments that impact firefighting efforts. The Department of Agriculture says it disputes ProPublica's findings. Across Washington state, students are currently enrolling in preschool and early childhood education programs ahead of the upcoming school year. But this month, the Trump administration announced it was barring undocumented immigrants from Head Start, leaving educators to figure out how to comply with the new restrictions. Joel Ryan is with the nonprofit Washington State Association of Head Start and ECAP, which advocates for federal and state-funded education programs that serve low-income families. He says Head Start providers aren't prepared to check the immigration status of their students.
There's not clear guidance from the Office of Head Start and the Department of Health and Human Services, so that's already causing quite a bit of confusion with providers. Second of all, the Head Start program does not want to be in a position where they're doing the job of ICE.
Ryan worries that the new restriction will discourage immigrant families who are in the U.S. legally from enrolling their children in Head Start. And a bit of news that will have some tails wagging. Four-legged friends will soon be able to ride the wave. The Seattle Times reports more dogs will soon be allowed to ride the Link Light Rail, Sounder commuter trains, and Sound Transit Express buses after the transit agency's governing board voted unanimously yesterday to create dog policies. Dogs will be required to be on leashes, and they'll ride for free. The agency is expected to have more details by the end of the year. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Hi, I'm Bill Radke. We assemble a group of thoughtful, likable people. I pronounce each of you likable. To discuss what happened. We all lived the same week you did. Maybe we paid a little more attention. So here we are to figure out what happened and what it all means. And I'm speaking here to my panelists, by which I mean Seattle Times editorial writer and columnist Claudia Rowe. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's good to see you. Washington Policy Center Communications Director David Boze. Hey there.
It is great to be here, Bill.
Good to have you too. KUOW Politics Editor Kat Smith. Kat, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. And when I say see, we do stream the show on YouTube, and we have a few. Kat is waving at you. How high definition are these cameras, by the way? I'm not really sure.
I'm stressed about it. Where's my filter?
We should have filters. Zoom people have filters. We should have filters. I'm getting up there.
Get with it.
Yeah, my neck says, shield me. Okay, so Kat Smith, you edit our political coverage here at KUOW, including our podcast, Sound Politics. You can listen at KUOW.org or, as they say, wherever podcasts come from. But have you voted politics editor, Kat Smith? Have you gotten around to that?
I do not have to say.
No, you do not. No, you do not.
I do have my ballot on my desk right now, actually.
Yes.
I was taking a spin through it before I came in here.
Well, we're going to take listeners on a spin through at least parts of it, and we're going to start with the mayor position of Seattle, Washington. KUOW spoke with the 4 leading candidates. The incumbent, Bruce Harrell, says his administration is making good progress on housing affordability and public safety and homelessness. He says in 2023 and 24, more than 4,000 people living outside accepted referrals to shelters.
At the same time, we had to remove encampments from parks and from sidewalks where unfortunately people were cohabitating. And so we've had to reach that calibration between cleaning up the city, making sure it's habitable, and sheltering people.
A calibration, he called it. You could call it a balancing act. Well, one of Harrell's challengers, Ry Armstrong, says the mayor's doing so much balancing that he's not really making any big difference.
Bruce Harrell has really, it's hard to say, but he's kind of navigated this middle ground where we end up doing nothing. And that to me is still a choice. And so I want us to take bold action to meet the moment of today instead of pandering to both sides to a point where, it's great politics, but I don't think it's good governance.
Bold action, huh? And what might that be? Well, challengers have different ideas, of course. Here's one of them, Joe Mallahan.
The mayor is about 2 things. He's about building housing, which is a good thing, and he's about sweeping encampments. He has no vision whatsoever on how to address addiction on our streets. And we've got maybe 5,000 people suffering addiction on the streets, sleeping in the open, sleeping in business places, doorsteps, and you can't treat addiction on the street. The mayor of Portland, his first 6 months, new guy, he added 3,000 emergency beds, and he did that in 6 months, and that's what I'm going to do.
And finally, here is challenger Katie Wilson saying that when Mayor Harrell's administration neglects people's needs, it makes us less safe.
There are thousands of people on the street with nowhere to go, and they're being relentlessly swept from place to place without the meaningful offers of shelter and services that could actually get them inside because we just don't have the places for them to go. And now they're destabilized, right? So instead of sleeping in a tent, you have someone sleeping in the doorway of a small business, and they're really stressed out, and maybe they have a crisis, and they break the windows, or they're behaving aggressively toward customers. And so this kind of public disorder and lack of safety, I think, is really related to the fact that we haven't succeeded in getting people inside.
You can hear all of those candidate interviews on KUOW's daily interview podcast, Soundside, wherever podcasts come from. Kat, you discussed all of this on Sound Politics, our political podcast. What choice would you say voters are making here in this primary election? What choice are we making that you think is very telling about Seattle right now?
So I think Seattle's at a crossroads. We have this business-friendly centrist mayor who served 1 term. Voters are going to get to choose. Do they want to stick with him, or do they want to go with someone more to the left? Katie Wilson has emerged as the fundraising leader among his 3 challengers. She's got a lot of buzz around her name, and she is positioning herself as this lefty progressive challenge, standing up to Bruce Harrell's more moderate policies and accusing him of trying to pander to progressive voters, to siphon votes away from her. So I think there's a choice that Seattle has of staying with the centrist road that we're on now, or going further to the left.
Do you have any glimmers, whether it's just what you observe editing and reporting, or polls, or anything that tells you, or do we just have to wait until the primary election results? Do you have any sense which way Seattle has shown itself to be leaning and reacting to our current government?
I mean, there was some polling back in May, I think, by the Northwest Progressive Institute that showed that Wilson and Harrell were about even. But May, it might as well have been 10 years ago. I don't know.
That's before all the ads.
Right. Yeah. And was it also before the New York City mayoral primary? Because
Yes.
now Wilson's getting compared to Zoran Mamdani.
Right.
And I don't know if people are going to, the lizard brain is going to attach to that. Like, oh, this viral candidate, this super progressive candidate in New York. Maybe we could have someone just like that here. I don't know yet. So yeah, I think anybody's guess. I don't make predictions.
Mm-hmm.
There's a major difference between Katie Wilson and the mayoral candidate in New York, and that is, I hate to say it, but charisma, telegenic qualities. I mean, this guy in New York is incredibly charismatic, and I think that Katie Wilson, while a very thoughtful candidate, and making a real bid against Harrell, who should be in a much stronger position, I think, at this point, I don't really see the fire from Katie Wilson yet that you see from Mamdani. I don't see that kind of connecting with voters electricity that you would need to surmount an incumbent like Bruce Harrell.
Isn't it a strange commentary on our times that we don't know? Like, we know a poll maybe back in May, one small thing, but we really don't know where the chips could fall, because I've always feel like these August primaries are strange. Like, I got my ballot for Pierce County, and I look at it like, why am I voting in the middle of summer? It just doesn't feel right. There's just something off about it.
Well, and a lot of people agree with you because people don't really turn out for. It's pretty sad. It's like 30%. People don't really turn out for these. So
and it's not like it's hard. I mean, it's delivered to you. It's in the mail.
It's so easy in this state. I've only lived in this
Exactly.
state for 3 years. I came here the same month that Bruce Harrell was sworn in during his first term, and it's so easy to vote here. And people don't vote.
It's harder not to vote.
Off your election primaries.
You have to just take that ballot and just abuse it.
You have to be a real diligent non-voter.
Yeah, you have to try.
Yeah. And there are some logistical requirements that make it so that we have this summertime election. Yeah. And David, you don't live in Seattle, correct?
No, I don't live in Seattle. I'm like an anthropologist. I just observe it from afar.
Yeah.
Watch it operate.
What do you observe over there as
well, it seemed like last election, Seattle took a turn toward the more moderate because things were getting a little out of control downtown. I experienced that myself when I work downtown from time to time. And, things are not looking that great. And that's been happening over the course of years where you see more boarded up places, more empty stores. There's more reports of violence against tourists and violence against others. And Harrell kind of stepped in and it seems to be moving Seattle into more moderate territory, and moderate by Seattle terms. And so, it seems like Seattle was satisfied with that.
I think tourism numbers have surged, if I'm reading correctly, this summer. Enormous numbers.
I think they
tourists,
have,
right?
But there was a recent attack or something on. I mean, I always feel bad because an attack could occur on anybody at any time, right? So, but it seems like it was a pretty strong move in that direction for Seattle, and one would think, I don't think like Seattle. That's the thing. But one would think that they would want time to consolidate those gains, and why there's
who's
risk involved in
they consolidating
voters,
what gains?
The majority of voters in Seattle that wanted a change, they got what they wanted. It's it's maybe not everything that everybody wanted, because he seems to have irritated I was going to say both sides, but multiple sides here where they're not in love with the guy, but he has fulfilled the obligation or the expectations, I think, of what people wanted if they wanted that switch.
I don't have a list of Mayor Harrell's endorsements in front of me, but he's done a lot to bring in a lot of different factions. He's backed this progressive revenue proposal, so-called Seattle Shield, and on and on. But we'll see. We don't know what's going to happen. Since David brought up some public safety, violence, et cetera, issues, maybe we should talk about prosecution in the city. Any thoughts about the city attorney, Ann Davison, and that voter debate about where we want to go with the city attorney.
I mean, I have kind of a similar take on this race that Ann Davison, this is a nonpartisan position, but she is a Republican. She became a Republican in 2020. And I think
2020, when who was president?
When Trump was president.
Yeah.
And so I think, Republicans and Trump have sort of a toxic brand in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Trump and Republicans are not super popular here. And so she has that working against her. I think I was talking about the lizard brain earlier. I don't think voters think about like, her soap and soda, her legislation that she backed against people with drug and prostitution convictions staying out of geographic areas of the city, or maybe she was too punitive on like repeat offenders and people who like rob the same store over and over.
High utilizers, she calls them.
I don't think the regular voters think about that. I think it's just like, she's a Republican. Does she support Trump? Trump is in office. Should I think about that? And her opponents, who are all three of them are to the left of her, all three of them are making that an issue on the campaign trail. And Davison says that this is not an issue in this race. This is a nonpartisan race.
Mm-hmm.
She has joined litigation suing the Trump administration over things like withholding federal funds for World Cup, sanctuary city policies. But her opponents say that she was not fast enough to join the litigation. And she says that she would prefer to focus on local issues. Whatever she thinks, her opponents are making it an issue. And so I think it will probably be on voters' minds.
I was interested in how often I saw Trump's name in all of including the mayoral candidates talking about, Trump proofing Seattle and other things. That guy dominates absolutely every facet of politics. You said, the Republican brand's problematic in Seattle. That's putting it at a minimum. You could probably expand that to all of Western Washington and maybe some parts, half of Spokane. But, you look at that and you see that dominance. It should be about, there's all kinds of local issues that the presidential race, right? No Republican, including Trump, is going to put Washington as a linchpin to their victory, their path. Every single person in Washington state could just go, you know what, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. And it would have done nothing to change the outcome. But our attention is so focused on the federal and not those things that really hit close to home that we have greater control over. But it'll be fascinating to see, as you point out, it's nonpartisan race, but the fact that she had that R next to her name, how poisonous is that? Because I was looking at the results of the last election, and you look at, there are some candidates who were, considered farther out there versus, say, Reichert, and the difference was like 1%, right? I mean, Reichert's statewide numbers were not, for a guy who has the long career in King County sheriff and all that, he just got hammered too. So,
well, the party didn't endorse him,
well,
right?
Yeah, maybe that was a plus for him. But I'm just saying he had 1% more than a lot of the other statewide candidates, except for maybe Jamie Herrera Butler was the exception. She was more popular than others. But I'll be very interested to see what happens in that race in Seattle. I don't think that she's a Trump candidate at all or anything like that. But just how poisonous is that? Just the association with the Republican brand in Seattle.
Well, it's been interesting to see some people advise her to leave the Republican Party, just be an independent, and so people we're busy, it's summertime or whatever. We do these little rule of thumb shorthand things, and maybe we see an R next to her name, but there's also it's like trying to intuit what she is saying by continuing to be a Republican. Is that just saying, I'm not going to pander to you. I am who I am. Here's my policies. Or is that some kind of, spidey signal of Trump love? Is that fair?
I don't know that it's even fair to paint her as like a Trumper. I mean, like you can be a Republican without being a Trumper, and
absolutely.
She never even really. Well, she never uses Trump's name. Like our colleague Amy Radel did a story about this race, and Davison didn't mention Trump by name. We could barely get her to even address it. I think Amy had to really flat out ask her. So I don't know. I mean, she's not out there wearing a Trump hat. I mean,
definitely.
Dave Reichert said something similar on the campaign trail, right? Didn't he? He said he made it seem like he wasn't a Trump supporter, and then behind closed doors, he had a Trump hat in his possession, and made it seem like the audience that he was speaking to that he was a Trump supporter, and then he would say different things on the campaign trail. So I don't know what's in somebody's heart, but she certainly doesn't like to talk about Trump.
Yeah.
Does it matter, David? What she thinks about the president doesn't matter to you.
What she thinks, well, for me, I don't care if I'm much more interested in what people do on specific policy than the overall individual there. But I think in Seattle, for her, I mean, if speaking solely as myself, not on behalf of the company I work for or anything, I mean, if I were chairman of the Republican Party, I would say, go ahead, run as an independent. I mean, in this state, there's a 41-year running track record of one party rule in the governor's mansion. Something you're doing is not working, right? So you might as well take a look and say, if you want policies to move in one certain direction, if you can find somebody who might identify as the Democrat or independent or whatever they want to call themselves, that moves at least the policies in your direction, then I'd consider that a win, and I would roll with that.
Okay, let's talk, before we take a break, let's talk about another choice before you, if you live in Seattle, on your ballot. There are 4 Seattle school board seats up for election. I think 3 actually on the primary ballot, Claudia, because
correct.
There's one that there's only a couple of candidates for the seat. So
Correct.
they're definitely going to the general election. But my point is the Seattle School Board could have a new majority. What's at stake here?
What's really at stake is I think, 2 things. First of all, it's very likely that who's ever on the school board is going to have a hand in appointing, hiring a new superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Brent Jones since, I think, 2021.
He's leaving.
He's leaving for both personal and medical reasons. I guess medical reasons are personal, too. His wife got a job big job in California. But frankly, he has been not a great leader. He has been I think you could say somewhat disengaged. I think that what's really at stake here is that the board has sort of thrown in with this governance model called student outcomes focused governance, which is very literal about that title. And so under student outcomes focused governance, on which they have paid, for which they have paid, several $100,000 for trainings and such, you're supposed to, as a board member, only be focused literally on literal student outcomes, grades, scores, graduation rates. So under that...
What's wrong with that?
Well, it means not taking a close look at the budget, which has been at like $100 million deficit 3 years running. That's a problem. It means far less community engagement. The board the current board voted to drop down from 2 public meetings a month to 1 and abolish their working committees, budget, finance, communications. So in addition, you're not supposed to, under student outcomes focused governance, you're not supposed to meet regularly with your constituents out in the community as a board member. There are just sort of infinite...
You're not the administration, you're the board. That's their idea?
And you're not supposed to sort of jump to responsiveness for every little community concern. This came up in, for instance, school shootings, right? Parents at Ingram were incredibly upset in the fall of 22 when a student was shot and killed in school hallways. And they felt that their representative on the school board wasn't responsive to them at all. It was very perplexing to a lot of people. And then then people started going, oh, student outcomes focused governance. That's what's happening here. You're supposed to not sort of jump to every question from just a constituent out in the community. Now, a lot of people would think, no, as a school board member, you are our conduit to the district. You are our representative. That's what most people think about school board members. But under this governance model, no, because the idea is that it's school board directors get too into the weeds. They're micromanaging. They're kind of, and that's why a pullback. But it has resulted in this real sort of disconnect between the district and the community, and possibly these $100 million budget deficits.
Okay, I want to hear from the other panel. I just want to, before I do that, I want to make sure we got to talk about, and you just started to get to it, we have deficits, enrollment down, big deficits, and a very controversial thing that the school district seemed to be headed toward was closing a bunch of schools.
Yes.
Isn't that a huge issue in this
It's
school
part of
board
the whole thing. I mean, that was quashed last fall, finally, but a lot of people think it's going to show up again. We do have a money problem, even though closing schools doesn't save a ton of money.
So what's the challenger's idea to save money without closing schools?
They don't. The challenger's ideas to save money are not well articulated. It's more like bring money in by increasing enrollment, by attracting kids back to the district, because every kid who enrolls in the district equates to roughly 20,000 state dollars.
So would that cover the deficit if they were as popular as they think they can be, beloved and desired by potential families?
It would address it. It wouldn't, I mean, I don't think
cover it.
anybody has done that math and is saying this many kids would do it, but it would certainly go a long way toward mitigating it.
Okay. Others?
I was curious, is that a mandate under this governance that you're speaking of? Like, the school board members are elected. I would think they'd independently be able to think for themselves and be able to decide, should I respond to this constituent or not? Is there some kind of mandate under the rules where they actually are not allowed to do these
You
things?
are, I mean, they can't like lock you up for doing it. However, they can castigate you in public, and one former board member was publicly castigated for meeting regularly with her constituents. So it is a mandate under student outcomes focused governance to not do that. And the organization grades school districts on how well they adhere to these rules. There is some question about how much money you pay to be part of this model, if your board votes, unanimously on certain things versus not unanimously. In any event, the board majority holds a lot of sway, and those who are running now for these empty seats have said they want to do away with student outcomes focused governance, so that could change what happens in Seattle.
My self-destructive contrarian nature, now I want to run for school board just so I can get insulted in public by somebody and say, too bad for you, I don't care. But should be a consultant. That's where the money is.
I had a question about like Seattle as a whole. We were just talking about voter engagement in August primaries and in off years, and is it Seattle has less kids and less families than other comparable cities that are similarly sized to us. Does it feel like there's like a disconnect between the people who vote in this city and the school board? Like, do you think that the people just kind of disregard the school board just because there aren't a lot of kids, there aren't a lot of families in this city?
I think that has traditionally been true. The sort of the line used to always be, more dogs than kids. Right? I think that has traditionally been true, sort of. Nobody's really paying attention. I don't think it's so true anymore, largely because there is broad recognition that the functioning of your school district affects a lot of other things in your city beyond the families and the kids in the schools. It affects your economy. It affects real estate values, which we care about here and everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, the functioning of your school goes beyond what happens in a class. Functioning of your school district goes beyond what happens in a classroom, though I would argue that's the most important part of what happens in a school district. I do think that Seattle's problems, for lack of a better word, have mushroomed and become sort of stark in relief against what people think a city like the kind of school district people believe a city like Seattle would have. A brainy, wealthy city should have a high-performing, well-financed, really, really functional school district. We don't.
Yeah.
And I think that disconnect is starting to kind of well up more broadly among a sort of wider range of potential voters.
Well, it sounds like it's well-funded per student. It's just not doing well overall. And as you point out, if it's not, how is it going to attract these students that have left or are not going to the school if they're not performing, above average? That
and
seems
if
like
there
a
are
pipe
40,
dream
if there are 40 kids in a classroom, which
Yeah.
is true in a number of middle schools and high schools, I'm told. In fact, I heard about one high school that had more than 40 kids in I think a math class.
That's a lot.
That's insane. It's not really workable. This is not a college lecture hall,
Well, that costs money, David. I'm sure you want more public money in schools, right?
Well, there's all kinds of questions that I have here, which is was how do you get to a point where, I'm assuming that people are looking at numbers and enrollment, and how do you get to this point where you're having $100 million holes in your school budget, and what's the responsibility? There's a lot of non-teaching staff in the Seattle School District. The management certainly gets paid very well. And I would think if you're paying management that well, they should be able to figure out when they're dealing with contracts and expenses and other things, they shouldn't lead themselves into a massive hole.
Well, we got to pause it
Same with
there.
Tacoma.
That's an overview. Again, I commend you to KUOW, Sound Politics, to Soundside, and dive in, and lots of other good sources. Seattle Times, I would say, excellent local publication. And we've got Claudia Rowe here as an editorial writer and columnist from the Times, and we've got KUOW's politics editor Kat Smith here, and Washington Policy Center communications director David Boze. We're going to come right back with more of them and more of Week in Review.
When farmers struggle, they have to get creative.
I kind of set a goal of 300 people. We charged $5. That'd give us a little bit of money to put towards something.
I'm Kyle Risdall. Sunflowers and income diversification next time on Marketplace.
Coming up this afternoon at 2:30 and 6:30 on KUOW.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
It's KUOW's Week in Review on the radio, on the podcast, on the YouTubes. I'm Bill Radke, and let's talk now, since we were just talking about our government, our election. Back to you, Claudia, at the Seattle Times. You're writing about how Washington State is it fair to say, failing kids in our child welfare system?
I think that's fair, though I hate to say it. I think the people who work in the system are, care tremendously, but I think we have some problems. And I think the clearest recent indicator of that is our state ombuds for families and children, Patrick Dowd. He issues these reports every year. They're usually very dry, pro forma. They're looking back at the prior year for critical incidents involving child deaths or near deaths. This year, for the first time, in addition to his 2024 sort of assessment, he threw in numbers for the first 2 quarters of 2025 because they have spiked sharply. Child deaths and near deaths of kids known to the system, who are not every kid in Washington, but kids who are on the radar of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. There were, I think, 47 of these cases in the first quarter, 45 in the second, and, so that total number of 92, dwarfs the entire pool of critical child incidents for years going back a decade and more.
What's the main reason?
The main reason appears to be that a lot of families are being, when they are reported to CPS, when there's a referral or some kind of red flag raised about what might be going on in a family, a lot of families are increasingly referred toward these voluntary programs called Family Assessment Response and Family Volunteer Services. They're essentially where a caseworker urges the family to consider drug treatment or mental health, but cannot force them and cannot say, we're taking your kids unless you go. And so there's not intensive oversight of these families who have been flagged for potentially dangerous situations involving kids. Now, it is right to try to take fewer kids into foster care because foster care has been kind of like a catch-all for poverty, for families in poverty, families with unstable housing, families where there's not enough to eat. That's not why you're supposed to take kids into foster care, but a lot of kids have been brought into foster care for those reasons traditionally, and foster care itself is damaging to children, not because of abuse in foster care, but because of the structure of foster care. It's bad for kids. It undercuts their ability to make connections with responsible, trustworthy adults. They move around all the time. They're always the new kid in school. So there are reasons to try to mitigate the numbers in foster care, for sure. But as Washington State so often does, we have this well-intended legislation, fewer kids in foster care. Good. but we never put the sort of hardcore services in place to make that well-intended legislation actually do what it was intended to do. We do it all the time. We did it with JR to 25, again, keeping young people or young adults, frankly, in youth facilities in the hopes that this would be good for their brain development. Great idea.
We're not doing it meaning there aren't enough professionals to help, or you use the word force. You mean there's not enough sort of coercive do this or we'll take your kids? What's the thing?
Well, if you if you're saying, hey, parent, we think it would be a great idea for you to get into substance abuse treatment. That might not be available. The slots might not be there, as we've just talked about, the lack of really solid behavioral health availability. And a parent who's addicted, that's often sort of the primary thing in their mind, how to get the next fix, how to satisfy the addiction. I mean, children of addicted people will often say, how come my mom chose, heroin over me, right? So, I mean, you have to be maybe somewhat forceful to push parents who need help into help. And so the Ombuds does have a suggestion for that called in-home foster care, which would be more court oversight of kids still living with their parents. It's just a proposal. It would take something, it wouldn't be an easy switch, but it's worth considering.
I look at this and there's the difference between the poverty situation where it's, people struggling, looking for some kind of services, and the addiction thing is different. Inherently, people with addictions in the house, with drugs, fentanyl, opiates, meth, they're gonna be a problem for kids. And I think prior to this legislation, there was already laws on the books that said children had a priority. The state and officials are to prefer placement with family, whether it's and
that is true.
Yeah, and it was extended family, and the definition of family is very broad.
Yes.
It could even be a friend of the family would be considered family in that situation. And so this change seems to have enabled people with neglectful conditions in the home and general addictive behaviors that keep their kids at home. And if there ever was something that was going to motivate somebody, to change, it would be. I mean, I know a lady who, that was her drop dead moment where it was like, I'm going to lose my baby, I'm getting off heroin, and now she's a business owner on the peninsula and just does a great job. But it's a terrifying and sad situation to see these kids. The number one priority has to be to protect the kids, and that's not happening right now.
In fairness, last session, the legislature did pass a law sort of tweaking this whole system about keep more kids at home, and it's called 6109, and it instructs judges to take into more serious consideration the presence of fentanyl, particularly fentanyl, in a home. So that was an adjustment, sort of, I would say, an acknowledgement of a problem with the underlying law that said, these things are not reason to take a kid. And drug abuse was one of them. Drug addiction was one of these things that did not rise to the level of criteria to allow you to put a kid in foster care. And the legislature said, okay, when there's a fentanyl situation, a judge can lend more weight, more credence to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been cases where I know of where a young kid is in a neglectful situation. Dad and girlfriend are asleep for days at a time. And they're caring for other little kids, and they're still not taken out of the house. They're and they're fending for themselves, trying to get food. It becomes absurd at a certain point.
I agree with you.
One of the interesting things I noted about the Times piece was that a lot of the kids that are dying are under 18 months, I think it was.
0 to 3 was sort of the biggest chunk.
Yes. Yeah. So it seems like, oftentimes new rules are created with this big kind of like, hey, we got to be more careful. Let's make this blanket rule that applies to everybody, So it seems like some very swift targeting for kids that are that age in that parental bracket would be a good idea.
I believe that judges do lend more weight to if there's a home where the parents are actively using fentanyl and there are very, very young children, that is happening. I mean, I think that there is broad recognition that it's more dangerous for that kid than a 15-year-old in that home, though it is dangerous for that.
As a foster
15-year-old
parent,
too.
I came across a lot of people who had situations where the child was going to be taken out of the home and they were offered services, but they just can't get that. I mean, addiction's a super powerful thing, and
Yes.
they can't let it go, and they have those services. But to be fair to you, I've also come across people who wanted services finally to get clean, not necessarily with kids at stake anymore, but if the bed's not available for 2 weeks for an addict,
it's too late.
It's too late.
Yeah.
They're
Okay,
gone.
we got to pause on that. And right before we take a break, just since we're talking about kids, I want to mention something I saw this week about vaccinations. Child, K through 12 vaccinations dropped again this year statewide. I read this in the Seattle Times. 89.6% of students have all their shots, down from 90.8% the year before, fifth decline in a row. And I'll just throw it out to panelists. Any reaction to the steady reduction in people getting their shots?
I think it's terrifying. I think we're, sort of actively reversing half a century or more of progress on child illnesses. I think we're welcoming measles and whooping cough with open arms, which are both potentially fatal. I don't understand the risk-reward calculation that some families are making.
Wasn't the reduction less than 1% on this one?
The reduction from a year ago, 89.6 compared to 90.8. So that's like a 1.2%. It just keeps slipping year after year. Any reaction?
I mean, nobody likes being told what to do, and nobody wants to get shots. But I think you have these are potentially deadly diseases, and herd immunity is so important. I think I was actually surprised to see that close to 10% of kids in schools aren't vaccinated. I did not realize it was that high, and that I found that to be a little scary.
There are pockets. I don't think that that's sort of true evenly across the state. It's pockets.
I was surprised that I wasn't surprised the lowest vaccination rate was Pend Oreille County in the northwest corner by Idaho, but the highest, 96.5% vaccination, is the county just east of Wenatchee, Douglas County, which is not what I expected. And by the way, I found out that in Washington State, I was thinking, I have kids. I don't think I provide their immunization records every year. I remember doing, I checked it, and that's right. When you enroll in a school, you need to say our kids have their shots, but you don't have to re-up that year after year to stay in school.
I feel like I'm doing that every year, trying to find those immunization shots.
I feel like I'm always
they're asking again. I'm like, now I got to go on which my chart to find this thing.
Well, I get that for summer camps and for sports and all these things, but my understanding, this is what I found on just quick search online, that's typically how it goes. And the exemptions, by the way, religious, medical, or personal/philosophical, except for measles, mumps, and rubella, the MMR, you can't just say it's personal and philosophical. It's got to be religious or medical.
Allow me to say something unpopular, at least in these circles. And I think part of this is coming from an overreach on the COVID situation, where you had lockdowns for an unreasonable amount of time for people. You had mandates regarding vaccines where the transmission wasn't, people were going to be able to transmit whether they were vaccinated or not. It was, your choice. And I was triple jabbed or whatever. But I'm saying, when you tell people that you have to do this thing, and then the reasoning is undermined, but you're still doing it because it became kind of an ideological issue instead of a health issue.
I never thought a vaccination was going to stop the disease cold in its tracks.
No, but it does. It does reduce some transmissions, and it makes the disease, if you do get it, it makes it less likely that you're going to be hospitalized or have serious complications.
That's for you, not for other people. You were still capable of transmitting COVID one way or the other, and then you had other mask mandates and other things. I mean, what I'm saying is there's lots of things, not all of them vaccine related, that kind of created, I think, an undermining of public health for a big chunk of the population. And that I think was, you had stupid things like drive-in theaters that were unable to open, water parks in Chelan that were closed down, all kinds of things that led to an increasing distrust of public health. And this is reaping the whirlwind, I think, for that. I mean, I think that's why you're seeing the decline, and I think that's going to continue for a while.
Continue, or like that was years ago, a once in a, I hope, lifetime. How do we handle a novel virus that's killing millions of people? And guess what? It wasn't perfect, and we discussed that a lot. But now what? Now what is this? What does the government do now to try to encourage? If you think they should encourage vaccinations, what do we do now?
Well, I mean, I think people are going to figure it out on their own. I mean, when your kid gets sick, you're going to think, okay, well, maybe I should have done something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the most part, I think people will learn the hard way on getting the vaccinations that are important for their kids.
Yeah. Okay, let's pause so we can say a little more about what else happened this week on KUOW's Week in Review. We're going to come right back after a short break.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local Kia dealers, presenting the all-electric EV9 with a Kia estimated range of 305 miles and access to over 40,000 fast chargers nationwide. More at kia.com.
I'm Rebecca Kesby, host of BBC NewsHour. Today, mass evacuations on the Thai-Cambodia border amid concerns of a new war. The US and Israel condemn France's plan to recognize a Palestinian state, and the man who set up a fake embassy near Delhi.
On the latest episode of Sound Politics, democracy vouchers in Seattle have made political donations democratic. Every voter gets $100 to donate to their favorite candidates. But are democracy vouchers helping grassroots campaigns? We're going to talk about it on Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
It's KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. We're steaming toward the end of the show. We're flying very, very fast in formation toward the end of the show. Yes, I'm talking Blue Angels. It is Seafair season. The Blue Angels perform over the lake next weekend. There has always been the love, hate, and everything in between debate. This year, Blue Angels critics got a billboard up on Rainier Avenue in the Valley. Say no to Blue Angels. Too loud, war trauma, pollution. Someone even sued the Navy, saying the Blue Angels flyover contributed to her cat's death. And I'm not talking about Cat Smith, and I'm glad to say that.
An actual feline.
An actual feline cat. How'd you react to this? R.I.P.
Sad about the cat.
Yes.
I'm a little skeptical that the Blue Angels killed her cat, but I don't have pets, but dogs are famously like scared of the Blue Angels, right? That's a thing.
Right. I think so.
Dogs don't like them. Yeah. I don't know. I think this lady's lawsuit is a little silly, because I did look up, like, is it a First Amendment violation for a government social media to block her, as she alleges that she was blocked from the Blue Angels after she began what I would consider harassing the Blue Angels on their Instagram comments. Fox News posted some of them. I read some of them. They are laden with F-bombs. And so apparently, I looked this up, the ACLU says that like a government account actually can block you from their social media if you are like violating the like platform norms, or like, throwing, like lobbing F-bombs, like, using profanity and stuff that goes against the community guidelines of the platform that you're on.
Our federal government cares a lot about norms and decency.
Well, and our military loves censorship too.
Yeah.
So I took a spin through their comments on their Instagram, and it's very, very pro Blue Angel. So they're definitely scrubbing their comments. But I did notice that there was one comment left in there that said, "Stop killing people's cats." So
Can we agree on that?
Justice for this cat.
There's a part of me that laughs about scrubbing profanity from a website associated with the Navy.
Yeah.
Because sailors are just known not to swear. But
not cussing like a sailor.
That said, if the 4th of July didn't kill that cat, the Blue Angels did not kill that cat.
Good point.
Because the 4th of July, I mean, for all the firework bans, it's still, your lungs vibrate from the sound
Cumulative
of those
heart stress.
Yeah,
it's cumulative
that's got to be it. But what percentage are the Blue Angels responsible for this feline's fall? Yeah. And how many lives are they responsible? They have 9 lives, so how many?
I think the question is not so much about cats, but money. I read that it's $40 million annually to pay for the Blue Angels, not just here in Seattle, but wherever they fly.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're contracting budgets everywhere. Is it smart to spend $40 million on Blue
I'd be
Angels?
curious how much extra publicity the Blue Angels get every year just in the Seattle market alone. I mean, I've had to buy marketing before, and it's pretty expensive. So, $40 million for a nation that, I mean, they travel the whole nation. They get so much publicity. Apparently, they're a successful recruiting tool. My question about them was how long before they're replaced by drones? I mean, it sounds sad, but I guess that's the question that was asked in Maverick Top Gun. And I apparently am the only American not to have seen it.
No, I haven't.
Nope.
Sorry.
Well, we're a room full of losers here. But
whoa. I saw it on a plane.
Oh, there you go.
Which is a great place to watch it.
All right.
It counts on that screen.
All right, let's pause on the it's like it's Republican performative virtue signaling, isn't it? Is they accuse isn't the Blue Angels like military virtue signaling? That's I was napping, but Republicans want me to be woke. And so here come the Blue Angels.
It is also
I'm not seeing that.
It's
okay,
cool.
maybe not.
It is cool though. Like I
It's
feel
super cool.
It's fraught, like watching it,
Yes.
and like watching reveling in the glorification of the military industrial complex. But also, it's pretty freaking cool.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
I think you're kind of it's more like it's a technological and skill display. I mean,
yes,
people. I mean, there's a military aspect of it. Obviously, it's for recruiting, but I think you could be a pacifist and look at that and go, somebody has some serious skills, right?
Yes. Okay, couple more
Amish could
things.
look at that.
The Amish are big fans of the Blue Angels, I'm told. The city of Seattle finally told us which police officers went to the January 6th Stop the Steal rally. We knew about a couple of them because they got fired for actually trespassing at the Capitol and standing nearby while the, quote, active insurrection took place. The other 4 officers sued to keep their names private. A watchdog group ferreted them out a few years ago. But yesterday, the city confirmed Sergeant Jacob Brisky, Sergeant Scotty Bach, Detective Michael Settle, Officer Jason Marchione were at the rally. The department has not yet said whether they're still on the force. David, what, if any, action should Seattle police take against these officers?
Well, I can't remember which of you were discussing this off the air, but I kind of agreed with the whole thing where if somebody's participating with, attacking a police officer or banging down a door or vandalizing property, then, I would understand firing them. If they're just participating in this rally and they're there to complain, I view that as, this thing was huge. And I remember in the lead up for the whole entire year, there was rallies galore at every city for all kinds of reasons that were, quote unquote, mostly peaceful, where cities were burning. Portland was burning for a year.
What about their
And
privacy?
All demanding things.
Yeah.
No, I think that should have been public a long time ago. They're public servants, give up the
and
info.
their names were out there. That
Yeah.
was a weird lawsuit.
Yeah.
Their names
Yeah,
have been published years ago.
It's one of those things where government tries to hold on, or people try to hold on to this information. You might as well just, it's going to come out, roll with it. So,
okay. There was a sentencing for this man who admitted to killing 4 University of Idaho students. Consecutive life terms, no possibility of parole. But Claudia, you're writing about what victims' families did not get from the accused.
What they did not get was a real explanation from Brian Kohberger about why he did what he did. And several of them really expected that. So that felt like a gut punch. They didn't get any kind of explanation, any sense of motive or exactly what he did, when and why these kids, this house, this night, all of that detail. The judge said, I understand that you are declining to talk, to make a statement. In court at the sentencing, the judge addressed the defendant and said that. The defendant, Brian Kohberger, said, I respectfully decline, underscoring the word respectfully, which was sort of ironic in his case because he's certainly not been respectful of anything or anyone. I think that what's really painful, everything about this case is really painful, but what many people may not fully grasp is that no matter what Brian Kohberger might say or any similar person who commits this kind of crime, it's never ever really going to answer the sort of the need that's in that question. For the families of the victims, maybe I would never attempt to speak for what they should or shouldn't expect or want. But for the rest of us, for sort of the average onlooker hoping for some kind of understanding or reason, what that really is, I think, is a hope for some sense of control over a completely out of control situation, out of control person. And the fact is, as I know from talking to some of these sorts of folks, no matter what they say, no matter how detailed, it never really satisfies the need inside to comprehend these kinds of crimes, and you're left feeling ultimately really empty and almost sort of jerked around when they do give you some quote unquote reason. It never really feels deep enough, and it just leaves you feeling worse.
And you're writing about that in the Times maybe next
Sunday.
week?
I just have a little thing on Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. You've done some conversations and some reporting on. You have some experience.
Yeah. I spoke to a serial killer for 5 years
Yeah.
attempting to do this very thing. Understand why, and I ultimately got some answers that left me feeling sort of nowhere.
Read that in the Seattle Times. We've got 2 minutes to. I really could use a smile after that. We always end the show on something of decency or hope or joy. Was there anything that made anyone smile?
People are probably familiar with Fat Bear Week. It happens in
Yes.
like September, October.
We vote on our favorite.
Those
fat bear.
live cams run a lot of the year, and I have been watching them for weeks now. And the bears are getting super fat. And my colleagues will say I keep one monitor up at my desk not to watch social media anymore. It's bear time, so I'm watching the bears, and they are getting real fat. And some of my favorite bears that I recognize are coming to the waterfall to eat the salmon. They jump in their mouths, and it makes me so happy.
You know them by sight?
Some of them, like
Wow.
one or two of them.
That's awesome. Anything else? Fat bears or otherwise?
I had to dig deep on this one because I had mostly negative experiences this
I'm
week.
sorry.
But I did see a monarch butterfly, and I had not seen one in a very long time. And, when I was a kid, I feel like I saw those big, beautiful butterflies a lot. And this time I was just sitting there at the picnic table with my kids, saw it light on some, land on some flowers nearby, and I thought, now that is a beautiful thing.
That is beautiful.
I got one thing for you,
Yeah.
and I always have to dig really deep on this one. I will credit my husband for reminding me that the company that makes Major League Baseball cards, Topps is the company, they hooked up with the Bob Ross painter company, and now they make Bob Ross themed baseball cards where you see like a slugger against this background of, snow-capped mountains and
trees.
lovely trees and happy little fence and happy little clouds like Bob Ross makes. And it is Fred, it is like Mr. Rogers
Yeah.
for adults, Bob Ross is. And I partake often. And that was kind of nice.
Now they need to make fantasy background cards with Rick Steves, and that would kind of seal the deal.
Beautiful. Claudia Rowe, Seattle Times editorial writer and columnist, Washington Policy Center Communications Director David Boze, KUOW Politics Editor Kat Smith. We're out of time. Thank you for being our great panel this week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Producer Kevin Kniestad and Kathy Faulkner on the board. Social media help from Juan Pablo Chiquiza and additional support from Hans Twite. It's a team effort. I'm Bill Radke, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again in 1 week.
Support for KUOW comes